In every town, there's always someone you trust without question, a figure of authority, someone you believe will always do what's right. But what happens when that trust is misplaced? What happens when the line between protector and predator is crossed? In this quiet, familiar community of Ridgewood, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Children played in the streets, neighbors exchanged friendly waves, and life moved at its usual pace. But beneath the surface of routine life, something was unfolding, something that would leave the town reeling. What do you do when the person everyone looks up to, the one sworn to serve and protect, has something to hide? At first, nothing seemed out of place. Sheriff Daniel Carter was a father, a husband, a man the entire town respected. Monique Harris, his daughter's best friend, was a bright young girl with her whole life ahead of her. Their paths crossed, like so many others in this small town. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Conversations that started casually became longer. Private moments once innocent turned into something much more complicated, and before anyone knew it, the line had been crossed. A line that could never be uncrossed. How does a community come to terms with the realization that the person they trusted the most is capable of the unimaginable? Some say every crime leaves a trail, no matter how carefully it's covered. But what happens when the one leading the search is the very person who knows exactly where that trail ends? Sheriff Daniel Carter wasn't just any lawman. He was the foundation of Ridgewood. Trusted by neighbors, respected by colleagues, admired by his family. To most, he was a man who balanced the pressures of law enforcement with the responsibilities of being a husband and father. Married to Susan Carter with 2 daughters, he lived the life others aspired to, seamlessly juggling work and family. His younger daughter, Emily Carter, adored him. To her, he wasn't just the sheriff, he was her hero. The rock of their family. But Monique Harris wasn't just Emily's best friend, she was practically family. She had spent countless weekends at the Carter household, growing up alongside Emily. From childhood games in the backyard to late-night study sessions, their friendship was built on years of trust and memories. And yet, Monique was also the daughter of Detective James Harris, one of Daniel Carter's most trusted deputies. Their families had celebrated birthdays together, shared holiday dinners, and stood by each other through the ups and downs of life. For Daniel, Monique had always been part of his world, constant, familiar, trusted. He had known her since she was a baby, had held her in his arms at the hospital, and had watched her grow up before his very eyes. But now, Monique was 17, no longer the little girl who used to giggle at his dad jokes, no longer the child who played hide and seek in his backyard. She was stepping into adulthood, with dreams of becoming an investigator herself, maybe even an FBI agent. She had ambition, drive, and the kind of energy that filled every room she entered. And as their paths crossed more frequently, something between them shifted, something that should never have happened. The first moment things changed. It started like any other day, one that should have slipped into the routine rhythm of life. But some moments have a way of shifting everything, and this one would be no different. Monique Harris hadn't planned on staying long at the sheriff's station. She had only stopped by to meet her father, Detective James Harris, hoping for a quick hello and a ride home. It was something she had done countless times before, waiting in the familiar halls, surrounded by the hum of conversations and the occasional ring of phones. It was ordinary, uneventful. But on this particular afternoon, something felt different. Daniel Carter spotted her from his office window as she entered the station. He had seen her thousands of times before, but today she caught his eye in a way she never had before. She wasn't the same girl he remembered. A shadow of adolescence had given way to the undeniable form of a young woman. There was grace in the way she moved now, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Daniel told himself it was nothing, just an observation, but the thought lingered longer than it should have. He had watched Monique grow up, laughed at her childhood antics, celebrated her achievements alongside his daughter, but today, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, something stirred inside him, a shift he didn't want to acknowledge. He tried to shake it off, tried to remind himself of who she was, who he was, but the more he watched her, the harder it became to look away. She wasn't just Monique Harris, the girl from backyard birthday parties. She was someone else now, someone he found himself noticing in ways he shouldn't. The moment of recognition unsettled him, like a sudden misstep on familiar ground. Guilt gnawed at the edges of his thoughts, whispering that this was wrong, that he needed to stop. But temptation has a way of creeping in, winding through even the most disciplined mind, and as much as he fought to push it away, it clung to him, persistent and unwelcome. When Monique made her way down the hall toward her father's desk, Daniel stepped out of his office, almost instinctively. He knew James was out on assignment. He had sent him out earlier himself. There was no one else for Monique to meet, no one else for her to sit with. And in that moment, Daniel saw an opportunity, a way to prolong this encounter, to explore a curiosity he didn't want to admit he felt. "Monique," he called out, his voice casual, almost fatherly, "your dad's not back yet. Why don't you come wait in my office?" There was nothing in his tone to suggest anything unusual, no reason for Monique to feel uneasy. She smiled easily, trusting him completely. He was, after all, her father's closest friend, someone she had known her entire life. Without hesitation, she followed him into his office, a place she had been in countless times before. And just like that, the first step had been taken, the first moment that would lead them down a road of no return. The first scene of manipulation. Monique sat across from Daniel Carter, completely at ease. She glanced around his office, taking in the framed commendations on the walls, the neatly stacked files, the sheriff's badge gleaming on his desk. She had always admired him. He was a respected man, a leader, someone she had known all her life. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her closely. He knew he needed to act normal, to keep everything casual. But the more he looked at her, the harder it became to ignore the thoughts creeping into his mind. He started with small talk. How was school? How were her college applications going? Monique, as bright and eager as always, responded enthusiastically. "I've been thinking about law enforcement," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Maybe something big. FBI, Secret Service. I want to make a real difference." That was when it clicked. An opportunity. A way to keep her close. "I know people in those agencies," Daniel said, leaning forward. "I could put in a good word for you, maybe even help you get some hands-on experience." "Really? You'd do that for me?" Monique asked, her excitement genuine. "Of course," Daniel replied smoothly, "but it's not an easy path. It takes discipline, training. If you want, I could help you prepare." She didn't hesitate. She trusted him. Why wouldn't she? He was her mentor, her best friend's father, her father's trusted colleague. She thought he was offering her guidance. She had no idea he was leading her into something she could never escape from. The training begins. At first, the sessions seemed harmless. Daniel framed them as mentorship, career guidance, a chance to shape her future. They met at his office after hours, going over case files and discussing investigative techniques. Monique was grateful. Not many people her age got direct mentorship from someone in a position of power. She soaked up everything he taught her, unaware of the slow, deliberate way he was drawing her in. But gradually, the dynamic began to shift. The conversations became more personal. He asked about her life, her fears, her dreams. He listened intently, making her feel understood in a way she had never felt before. Then came the secrecy. "People might not understand how special this is," Daniel told her one evening. "They might think I'm giving you special treatment, that you're getting advantages others don't. You should be careful who you tell about our sessions." At first, Monique didn't think much of it. It made sense. She had always heard that success required sacrifices. If keeping these meetings quiet was part of the process, then so be it. The sessions stretched later into the night. At first, they were held in his office. Then they moved elsewhere, places more private, where they wouldn't be disturbed. Daniel was patient, careful. He didn't rush anything. He let Monique come to him, let her trust deepen. And before she realized it, She depended on him, not just for career guidance, but for emotional support. He had positioned himself as the most important figure in her life, and she didn't even see the trap closing around her. The affair begins. One evening, as they sat together reviewing case files, Daniel's hand lingered on Monique's shoulder a little too long. She didn't pull away. She didn't know she should. It felt natural, just part of the closeness they had built. And Daniel, sensing her acceptance, took it as permission. The first kiss came without warning, soft, gentle, but it didn't feel forced. It felt inevitable, as if it had been building all along. Monique, caught in the moment, didn't question it. She had grown used to following Daniel's lead, trusting his guidance. If this was part of their connection, then it had to be okay, right? That night, the boundary between mentor and lover disappeared completely. Their meetings took on a different meaning, no longer about mentorship, but about something darker, something secret. Something she would never be able to undo. Daniel had won. He had her where he wanted her, completely under his control, and she had no idea she was falling deeper into a nightmare. The pregnancy and betrayal. For weeks, Monique felt different. At first she ignored it, convincing herself it was nothing, but then the nausea came, the fatigue, the sense that something inside her had changed. Eventually she bought a pregnancy test. As she watched the 2 lines appear, confirming her worst fear, her hands trembled, her mind raced. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her first thought was to tell Daniel. He would know what to do. He had always guided her, always reassured her. He had promised he would always be there for her. But when she told him, the reaction wasn't what she expected. "No, this can't happen." His voice was sharp, panicked. "No one can know, Monique. This will ruin everything." She stared at him, confusion turning to hurt. "But I thought you said we were in this together?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his mind spinning. He couldn't afford this scandal. If anyone found out, his wife, the town, the department, his life would be over. "You have to get rid of it," he said finally. "It's the only way." Monique's stomach dropped. "You're asking me to have an abortion," she whispered. "I'm telling you it's the only way." His voice was cold now, detached. Monique shook her head. "No, I won't do that. This is our child, Daniel. You promised me." For the first time, Daniel saw that Monique truly believed in the fantasy he had built around them. That their relationship was real, that they had a future. But he knew the truth. He had never planned for this. And now, he needed to fix his mistake. Daniel Carter had built his entire life on control. His job, his family, his reputation, and now, it was all slipping through his fingers. He tried reasoning with Monique. He begged, he threatened, but she refused, and that left him with only one choice. He invited her to a secluded cabin, pretending he wanted to talk things through. Monique, still believing in his promises, went willingly. She thought he was finally going to stand by her. But as they sat together over dinner, she didn't notice the small vial in his hand. She didn't see him tip it into her wine as he poured her another glass. She only noticed when she started to feel lightheaded. Weak, her vision blurred, and she looked at him in confusion. "Oh, I feel so good." Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand in a gesture of false comfort. "It's okay," he said softly. "You just need to rest. Everything's going to be fine." As Monique's body grew limp, Daniel Carter knew there was no turning back. He carried her to his truck, driving into the night, toward a place where no one would ever find her. A place where his secret could stay buried forever. When Monique Harris didn't come home that night, her parents, Detective James Harris and Denise Harris, didn't worry at first. She was a teenager. Maybe she had stayed at Emily Carter's house without telling them. Maybe she had lost track of time. But as the hours passed with no word, concern turned to fear. James tried her phone. No answer. Denise called her friends. No one had seen her. Monique wasn't the type to vanish without a word. And as midnight came and went, dread settled over them like a heavy fog. By morning, James Harris knew something was terribly wrong. His instinct screamed at him something wasn't right. He did what any father would do. He reported his own daughter missing. Sheriff Daniel Carter was the first to take the call. He kept his voice steady, his demeanor calm, promising James and Denise that he would do everything in his power to find Monique. But every step he took was carefully planned. He orchestrated the search with precision, assigning officers to areas far from where he knew Monique's body was buried, steering the investigation away from the truth. He suggested she might have run away, might be hiding with a friend. He played the part of the dedicated sheriff, comforting Denise as she cried, reassuring James when his frustration boiled over. "We'll find her," Daniel promised. "I swear to you, we'll bring her home." But even as he spoke the words, he knew the truth. Monique Harris would never be coming home. For weeks, the town searched. Flyers with Monique's face were plastered on street corners, in shop windows, in church bulletins. Volunteers combed through Ridgewood, calling her name, hoping for a clue. But Daniel Carter knew they would find nothing. Because he had made sure of it. James Harris was relentless, refusing to accept the idea that Monique had simply vanished. He questioned everyone, retraced every step of her last known movements, and, slowly, the pieces of the puzzle began to shift. He obtained Monique's phone records, traced her last calls, and that's when he found it. The final call she had made the night she disappeared had been to Sheriff Daniel Carter. Confused, James confronted him. "Daniel, did Monique call you that night?" Daniel barely flinched. "She did, yeah. She was upset, said she needed to talk. I told her to go home and get some rest." It was a smooth lie, almost too smooth, but James wasn't convinced. He had known Daniel for years. He knew when something didn't add up, and something about Daniel Carter's answers felt off. 5 months passed. Hope began to fade. The town started to move on, until 2 hikers stumbled upon something they were never meant to find. They had been trekking through the wooded outskirts of Ridgewood, a remote area rarely visited, but that day something caught their eye, a patch of disturbed earth, the ground slightly sunken. At first they thought nothing of it, but then they saw something partially buried beneath the leaves. Fabric, torn, dirty, unnatural in the middle of the forest. They hesitated. Then, with trembling hands, they uncovered more. A human arm. They called the police immediately, and by the time forensic teams arrived, the truth had already begun to unravel. Monique Harris had been found. As the forensic team unearthed the body, the crime scene investigators made 2 key discoveries that would break the case wide open. First, a small vial, half buried near the grave. Lab analysis revealed traces of a powerful sedative, the same one used in cases of drugged homicides. Second, the GPS data from Monique's phone was analyzed, showing a chilling last route, a drive leading straight from Ridgewood to the woods where her body was found. And the final nail in the coffin? Surveillance footage from a gas station near the burial site. The grainy video showed a truck pulling in late at night. Sheriff Daniel Carter's truck. James Harris watched the footage in silence, his hands shaking with rage. The man he had trusted for years, the man leading the search for his daughter, had been the one who took her life. Daniel Carter was sitting at his desk when they came for him. James Harris, flanked by 2 state detectives, walked into the sheriff's office. The entire department fell silent as James approached Daniel's desk. "Stand up, Daniel." Daniel frowned, playing the part of the confused friend. "James, what's this about?" "You know exactly what this is about," James said coldly. "You're under arrest for the murder of my daughter." The room erupted in stunned whispers as the detectives moved in, snapping handcuffs onto Daniel's wrists. He didn't fight. He knew it was over. As they led him out of the station, past the officers who had once respected him, he heard the murmurs of disbelief, the look of betrayal in their eyes. For the first time in his life, Daniel Carter had lost control. The courtroom was packed. The town of Ridgewood watched as the trial of Sheriff Daniel Carter unfolded. A man once revered, now exposed as a manipulator and a murderer. The prosecution laid out the evidence, the surveillance footage, the GPS data, the vial found near the grave, and most damning of all, the revelation that Monique had been pregnant. Her autopsy revealed the child growing inside her, the child Daniel Carter had fathered, the child he had killed along with her. Denise Harris wept openly as the truth was spoken aloud in court. James sat stone-faced, rage and grief warring within him. And when Daniel finally took the stand, the weight of his guilt crushed him. "Did you kill Monique Harris?" the prosecutor demanded. Daniel lowered his head. His voice broke. "Yes." Gasps filled the courtroom. Denise collapsed into silent sobs. James closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the table, holding himself together by sheer force of will. "And do you understand that you also killed your own child?" Tears slipped down Daniel's face. He had nothing left, no lies to tell, no defenses to hide behind. "Yes." The judge's voice was steady as he delivered the final verdict. "Daniel Carter, you have been found guilty of first-degree murder, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck, and just like that, the once respected sheriff was nothing more than a prisoner. James and Denise clung to each other, grieving not just for the daughter they lost, but for the grandchild they would never meet. The town of Ridgewood would never forget the betrayal, the horror, the tragedy. And as Daniel Carter was led away in shackles, one truth remained clear. No one, not even the sheriff, is above the law. Subscribe to True Crime by Mayor for more amazing and unbelievable true crime stories. Watch out, and bye for now.